Now, if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter or you are the Sanders campaign, 5 of the last 6, that's got to be very exciting news, right? If you're a Clinton supporter, though, or if you're the Clinton campaign, that run of 5 out of 6 Sanders victories certainly isn't good news for the Clinton side, but there's also an easy reason to understand why that string of Sanders victories is not causing a major freakout on the Clinton side. And that's because of those last 5 states that Bernie Sanders has won, every single one of them, Idaho, Utah, Alaska, Hawaii, Washington, all 5 of them were caucuses. For whatever reason, Bernie Sanders and his campaign have done great in caucuses this year. There are 12 states that have held caucuses on the Democratic side so far in this entire primary campaign. And Senator Sanders did get off to a slow start in the caucuses. He lost the first 2 caucuses by barely in Iowa and by a little bit in Nevada. But since then, of all the caucus states, he has won 10 straight. And he's won those 10 straight caucus victories by big, big margins. And that's look at the margin of victory he's got there. Frequently up over, 40%. That's an amazing record in caucus states. 10 of the 12 of them he's won, and big wins in all of them that he's won. Here's the weakness, though, in that track record for the Sanders campaign. I don't want to take anything away from how impressive that is in terms of all those wins in those caucus states, but it's also true that Senator Sanders cannot be expected to keep that up. And that's simply because there are almost no more caucus states. I mean, we're not yet halfway through the primary calendar, but there are only 2 caucus states left. Wyoming in April and North Dakota in June. And yes, if past is prologue, Bernie Sanders will win the caucuses in Wyoming and win the caucuses in North Dakota. And honestly, if past is prologue, he will crush caucuses. But there just aren't enough of those kinds of contests left to push him up ahead of Hillary Clinton overall in the delegate count. Unless things change radically, these caucus wins aren't enough. And the Sanders campaign appears to know that. The candidate himself has started to make a public case that he may not win the nomination on pledged delegates, but maybe he'll win by persuading the superdelegates to switch their support to him. He wants to win on superdelegates instead of the delegates that he can win in primaries and caucuses. And that is a way to win, but it's not the kind of case that Senator Sanders was making at the outset of this campaign. I think it's not the kind of case for how to win the nomination that his supporters would either expect of him or necessarily even support if that's going to be the way he tries to win. In addition to the superdelegate strategy, today the Sanders campaign advanced a new theory of the case for where they stand against Secretary Clinton in the race for the nomination. Bernie Sanders' senior strategist, Tad Devine, today told reporters that the only reason Senator Sanders is so far behind Secretary Clinton in the overall race is because of Secretary Clinton getting victories, quote, where Bernie Sanders did not compete. Tad Devine today told reporters, he gave them a list of 8 states where he said the only reason Secretary Clinton won is because Bernie Sanders didn't try in those states. These are states where he said the Bernie Sanders campaign did not, quote, compete with her. He listed Texas, Alabama, Virginia, Louisiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, Georgia, and Arkansas. All Super Tuesday states, right? Now, it's one thing to make the case that yeah, you've had some wins and some losses, but here's the way you're going to win, right? So it's one thing to make that case. You try to sell reporters on that. All campaigns do. It's another thing to make the case that the only reason you've lost thus far is because you weren't really trying to win. But you'll try to win from here on out, and that's why you're going to win the nomination. Honestly, I think the Sanders campaign is going to have to walk back this line of argument in coming days if they have not already. I'll tell you part of why I think they're going to have to walk it back. All of these states that the Sanders campaign identified today as places that they lost because they didn't even try to compete there, those were all Super Tuesday states in the South, right? The Super Tuesday contests were held on March 1st. You might remember on this show, we did a whole bunch of reporting in the lead up to Super Tuesday on what was going on with the Clinton campaign and the Sanders campaign in terms of their ground operations in Super Tuesday states. So not just tracking TV spending and candidate appearances, which is what everybody else was looking at. We also took a deeper look at things like opening campaign offices and hiring staffers in the state. In advance of Super Tuesday, in advance of those big March 1st contests, one of the things that we reported, I think exclusively here in terms of the national media, was something that we found surprising. And we reported it in advance of Super Super Tuesday. We reported it in February of this year. And what we reported was that the Sanders campaign was not only competing in a whole bunch of those southern states, we reported that they were first on the ground ahead of the Clinton campaign in those states. They had larger campaign operations than the Clinton campaign did in those states. We reported that in Texas, in Alabama, in Tennessee, and Virginia. Those are just 4 of the southern states where we were able to track well in advance of the March 1st Super Tuesday races that the Sanders campaign had actually been there first and opened more offices than the Clinton campaign. So if the Sanders campaign is now going to say they only lost those states because they basically wanted to, because they meant to lose them, they didn't even try to win them, honestly, that is bullpucky. That is not what happened, and I think that is not going to fly. So I think they will have to walk that back. I think there is a case to be made for why Senator Bernie Sanders could still pull out the Democratic nomination. But this idea that it's because he's going to start trying and he was trying before, that is not